Hello and welcome to the Loyal Homes Podcast, where we help you navigate today's real estate market. My name is Tomm Dool.
And I'm Chris Fenton.
Today we're going to be discussing where we left off on our last episode. Last episode we were talking about questions that potential sellers have before listing their homes. Right. So today I want to continue that conversation, but this time I want to go from the perspective of the sellers after that home has been listed.
Sounds good.
All right. So I'm your client. We just gone through, we set up everything. We got, the sign came up today. You give me a phone call. Hey, Tomm, great. Guess what? we got our first showing for next Saturday.
Sure.
Sheer panic.
Right. Exactly.
Right. What do I do? What do I do, Chris? Like, what do I need to do to make sure my house looks good?
Yeah. I mean, the first advice I make sure that my clients know is you don't want to be home for the showing. So we want to make sure that when the buyer comes into the house and takes a look around, that they can imagine themselves living there. Really, really hard to imagine themselves owning the house when the person that owns the house is there. So that's the first thing. Don't leave after they show up. Don't say hi and leave. Make sure you're not there when they show up.
Is there anything I need to prepare?
Yeah, I mean, it's all first impressions, right? So we want everything to look fantastic. We want, if there's any, the first impression is the impression when they pull up to the house. What does it look like? So go outside, and you probably already done this, but go outside, make sure everything looks good. Inside, it's just declutter, right? Move your shoes by the front door, move your coats if they're there, whatever's there. I always talk to clients about countertops, kitchen countertops, bathroom countertops. Like to have those clear. Toilet seat down, that's a pet peeve of mine for showings. And then things like toothbrushes, like these are personal items that are very personal. Make sure they're there, put away. Other than that,
And pet odors and stuff like that, making sure that your cat litter has been cleaned or even maybe removed from the house during the time period, and anything that your dogs might have left behind.
Yeah, because not everybody likes dogs and cats. We do, but doesn't mean everybody does, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that takes care of your sight, your smell. There's the old make it smell. That's taking away the smells, but can we add any smells to make it look better, to make it smell better? They always say bake some cookies.
Yeah, we talked about that last episode. Yeah, absolutely. So after the showing, and now as the client, I'm probably sitting there going, oh, "What happened? Did he like the house? Did he not like the house? Could I have done something better?" What do you do for post showing
feedback?
Yeah.
So my honest opinion about that, and of course I'd only give my honest opinion, is I don't put much stock into post showing feedback. If you look at it from a real estate professional's perspective, the person showing the house, there's not really a lot of upside to them saying anything out of the way nice about the house, because they may need to negotiate against that seller at some point in the future. So they're not going to go too far out of their way to say anything that this was the greatest showing ever and they really love the house. And then they're not going to say anything overly negative that's going to be constructive, because what's the upside for them to do that? A smart real estate agent knows there's no point in them attaching their name to negative feedback. So for me, feedback isn't overly useful. I'm as a real estate agent, I'm gauging how many showings we're getting in the first few weeks. That tells me a lot about how well priced we are, how the house is looking, all of those things. But for the odd time you get good feedback, and even so, it's still nice as the seller to know what's going on. Yeah. So me as a real estate professional, I'm going to call and let you know on a regular basis what the showings were, what the feedback was, for better or worse.
Yeah, sounds good. And I think they're going to appreciate any little tiny bit of information, because they're sitting there wondering,
Yeah, and I think as a seller, you need to understand that this is a weird situation where people are coming into your house, and you're not really going to get that feedback. Yeah. So knowing that up front is going to make you a little bit more comfortable.
And don't take anything, if you're not hearing anything personally either, right?
Totally.
Because everybody has different opinions and stuff, and it's not a reflection on you. It's, might not met their needs, right? So we got an offer in. How do we go about negotiating? What are some of the tips for negotiating this?
Yeah, I mean, sort of market dependent. How you negotiate something 2 years ago when the market was sky high and everything was selling over asking prices, different from how you would do it in a more of a buyer's market where things are selling below asking price. I think the best tips I can give around negotiating would be, don't take anything personally, because if you perceive it as a low offer, if you get your back up against a wall, it just makes it harder to make good decisions. Yeah. So the next thing would be, I don't put a lot of stock into that first offer. So if I get, for example, if I get a lowball, quote unquote, lowball offer, and I like to think that there are really no lowball offers, but if I get an offer that maybe isn't where I would like it to be, I don't know at that point if that buyer is really serious and that's where they think the value of the house is, or if they're just trying.
Just trying to get the best.
Right?
Yeah.
So exactly. I think that your first response is super critical. Responding in a way that's pretty close to your asking price. It sends the message, yeah, look, we're willing to negotiate, but we're not going down that low. Now, how that buyer then responds to that, that's when I start to understand where they're really at in their head. And then you can start making good decisions from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I want to go back and say, don't look at lowball offers and feel like they're lowball offers. It's a starting point. It's a place to start to feel them out. It's always worth that fact-finding mission in the day of DocuSign and AuthentiSign. You don't even have to necessarily meet with your real estate agent to sign a counteroffer. So go through that trouble to find out where that buyer's sitting.
Yeah, fair enough. So as somebody who has never sold a house before, we got all these conditions. Everything's coming at us, and this can be kind of overwhelming. So can you kind of discuss some of the conditions that are normal, what to expect, and how to deal with them and what they mean?
Yeah, so your typical conditions on a regular residential sale in a city are going to be subject to financing, subject to inspection, and subject to insurance. So let's talk about those main three first. Subject to financing really just means that the person, it doesn't tell you anything about that person's financing. Having that condition in doesn't mean that they are a good or a bad candidate for financing. Yeah. It just means that they're asking for a period of time, and typically 2 weeks, to go talk to a mortgage person, a bank, a lender, and find out if they're approved. In my experience, that condition doesn't usually come off until the 11th hour of the last day. So I think that's a good thing to know. Yeah. Right. I think that's because bankers and everybody works to deadlines. You don't usually get any feedback in that process. You don't usually, as a listing agent, really know what's going on. You can call the buyer's agent and say, hey, how's the financing shaping up? Yeah. But you're not going to get any meaningful feedback on that. So what are the other ones? Inspection, right?
Yeah, inspection.
So with inspection, that's an interesting one, and probably the most stressful one, I think, for sellers, right? Yeah. Your house is getting inspected, and the inspector's job is to find things wrong with your house.
Even if it's a brand new build, they'll still come out with a document this thick.
Never had a building inspection, and I've been involved in 1,000 plus that didn't have that long a list of things wrong with the house. You can find it in anything, right? Yeah. Like you say, a new house. Yeah. So being aware of that. Now, the inspection process, the inspector shows up at the house. It's different in different markets and it's handled different ways, but the inspector typically shows up, does their inspection, and then meets with the buyer client and the buyer's agent at the end to do a walkthrough where they basically do an overview of what they found. I'll give you my perspective as a listing agent. I don't normally go and ask how it went. I know that sellers want to know how it went. Yeah. I don't normally do that. There's always a danger in real estate that they're going to try to use that the buyer's agent's going to try to use that inspection to renegotiate. I don't really like playing that game. I don't think you should ever renegotiate unless something massive is found, right? That is
foundation issues or roofing issues
that you didn't know about. That's a surprise to everybody. Now that's something we need to talk about. That's something where a seller has a problem with their house. They didn't know about it. Yeah. And maybe there is a renegotiation. But barring that, I don't really feel like that's the purpose of a building inspection. It's just my personal and professional opinion. So I don't kind of go and open that door and crack it open how to go. I always tell my clients, if there's something big, I'm getting a call that first day. Yes. Right. So no news is usually good news. Yeah. And then the last one, insurance, subject to insurance, is really more of a formality. I don't know that I've ever seen a deal fall apart on an insurance clause.
Only during fire
season,
right? So what kind of happens here when there's a forest fire within so many kilometers? They change it every year. I think it's like now 50 or 150 or something like that. Insurance companies can't insure. The underwriters won't write the insurance,
which means that you can't get a mortgage.
Which you can't get a mortgage. You can't do nothing. So we have to actually extend, for sales to happen. Otherwise, everybody's in limbo. And
we put in a force majeure clause into that contract during forest fire season that says, if due to an act of God, we can't close this deal, it will get extended by 30 days.
Yeah, exactly. Even in wintertime can happen as well, because we had road closures, especially in our community. We had, the landslide and stuff like that, and closed our roads down for months. Right. So
other clauses that mention are other subject conditions that people work through due diligence. Septic if you're in the country, water test if you're on any kind of water system that's not public. Subject to a title search if there's anything on the title that needs to be investigated. Subject to checking with the local municipality for things like final occupancy permits, anything related to the zoning. Subject to the property disclosure statement. These are some more that can happen. The long and short of it is these conditions are typically for the benefit of the buyer.
Yes.
In order to give them time to and a safety in buying your house so that they can go out and spend the money, spend the time to investigate everything they need to investigate to feel comfortable removing the conditions. Once they remove the conditions, we consider it sold, even though the money hasn't changed hands. We put up the sold sign, and typically 99.9% of the time those close.
Yeah, exactly. So talking about closing, what are we kind of looking at typical closing period? Like how long does it take to close, and what's involved with that closing, and who do we have to bring in to?
Yeah, so closing, there's no really typical, it's all, as you know, it's all negotiable.
Yeah.
If I had to say typical, I'd say probably a couple months after completion is the average maybe. After subject removal. So when the conditions get removed, it's usually a couple more months until we close. What you need for closing is you need a BC lawyer or notary. So even if you're selling your house and you live in the States or you're away out of the country or you're in Alberta, you need a BC lawyer or notary.
Yes.
And they're going to take care of that closing procedure, all the legals of transferring title, clearing mortgages, adding mortgages, all of that stuff. Now I don't know if I'm getting ahead of your questions, but when you're getting up to completion time, you need to get all your stuff out. You need to get the house cleaned as a seller, so you need to be prepared for that, right? That the house is going to be left spotless.
Yeah. And it's definitely important in getting your ducks in a row, especially if you're not going to be in the country before you leave, because I've had a few people like, oh, I'm not going to be here that week that our house is closing. I'm like, well, did you tell your notary? And I had that question today, actually. Yeah. And I was like, you need to connect with them so that they can provide you those instructions, because you got to kind of be there for your closing. And if you can't, you have to use a notary or somewhere where you're going to be that's communicating with the notary doing the closing.
Yeah, you can have a notary, exactly. You can have a notary in Kansas.
Yeah.
But you have to have they're working with a notary that's local. So you're signing in front of the Kansas notary, but the work is being done here locally. And then things like, I guess the other thing around closing is like insurance. So making sure that you have a little bit of overlap on your insurance. Yeah. So that there isn't any time period where that house is uninsured between your insurance getting pulled off as a seller and the new buyer's insurance getting put on. And then of course, just all of the regular things of changing your utilities, canceling your hydro, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And usually as, professionals, we provide you a list of things that you should be doing, like the canceling. A lot of people forget that. So, hopefully your real estate agent is guiding you through those steps, and your notary and stuff will help you through the conveyancing part of things. And your real estate agent's going to send all the documents and everything to your notary to make sure everything goes smoothly on your day.
And your notary is going to do something called a statement of adjustments, which is they're going to take things like property tax, anything that you paid for the whole year or paid longer than the closing date, and they're going to adjust it so the buyer pays their portion of the year, and that happens on something called the statement of adjustments. So just know that all of these things that you maybe paid for the month of whatever, you're going to get reimbursed.
And it could be the other way as well, depending on time of the year. You might still owe part of that taxes if the new buyer is going to be paying. So so the notary will help navigate through that, and plus whatever closing costs that you may have. Something to consider about, and definitely talk with the notary side on that one. House has been on the market. 1 week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, 3 weeks goes by. I'm getting no showings. Yeah. How do we navigate? How do we get ourselves back into the market? Because obviously we've fallen off the market now.
Yeah, this is the story of selling real estate as a listing agent and as a seller. So there are 4 reasons a house doesn't sell. Okay, and we can use the process of elimination to figure out what's going on. The first reason a house doesn't sell is if it's in really poor condition. Yeah. And typically, you can sell just about anything unless it's unfit for habitation, and even then, that's not usually the case. So we cross that one off. The next one is access. Are we having showings turned down? Are we booking showings but you're turning them down, or tenants turning them down, or for some reason they're not happening? That can really be a cause. Most of the time it's not. So we cross that off the list. Now there's 2 reasons left that a house doesn't sell. The one is marketing. Is the house being marketed? Does it look good in the pictures? Does the write-up sound good? And then is that information being spread in a big way? When you're hiring our company, I know that you're getting as good a marketing as you could possibly get anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
So that's, for us at least, that's not the case. And then the last one is price. And so if you've eliminated the last three, the other three, you're down to price. And it's an undeniable fact. If you've eliminated those three, if you ever think of a fifth reason, tell me, because I would love to hear it.
Yeah.
But it comes down to price. So, this is super rule of thumb, but what I always tell people is if we're 5% overpriced, less than 5% overpriced, we're probably going to get showings right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But we're not going to attract an offer.
Yeah.
Right? So we're getting lots of showings, but no offers are coming in. That's probably a slightly overpriced thing. If we're coming out of the gate and we're not getting showings, or we had like one showing the day one and then crickets for 2 weeks, that's a bigger problem. That's a 10% or more rule of thumb. This is very broad rule of thumb, but it's telling us there's a bigger pricing issue there. So we people that own things, we human beings that have human brains and human hearts, we tend to overvalue our assets. We tend to think what we own is worth more than it is. It's just in our nature. So you have to really look at yourself and say, like, did I overprice this, or did me and my real estate agent look at these comparables and make some sort of mistake and we overpriced this? And that's a time to go and look at pricing again.
And with a changing market, we really have to pay attention to how the market's going to
totally.
That's a tricky.
That's a beautiful thing. Like in a real estate market that's falling or dropping or declining, it's really hard to price using comparable sales because you're looking at this house that's already an imperfect comparable.
Yeah, it's in a different window of time.
And it's in a different window of time.
Yeah.
And so how do you adjust downward for that, knowing that house that sold 3 months ago is not worth what it wouldn't sell for the same amount today? Conversely, if you're going in an upward market, you got to be very careful because the opposite is true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the main thing around this is where I'm going with all of this is if you're on the market for 3 weeks and you had one showing and your marketing is good and your access is good and your condition is good, you have to bring your price down. And clients often say to me, like, it looks bad when I bring my price down. Like, I don't want to, there's just something about us that we don't want to do that because of how it looks.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true. Maybe that's true to some people. It looks really bad when your house doesn't sell. And that's the alternative. So you really only have those two options in my experience. So what I always tell my clients is time is super important in this process. Even if you don't have to sell and you're not, in a huge hurry, time is your enemy here because the longer a house sits on the market, typically speaking, vast majority of the time, the less money it's going to sell for.
Yes.
So these price adjustments, getting real with the information and making decisions should happen quickly in a matter of weeks and certainly not months. I've been in declining markets that are dropping so fast that, people adjust their price down and then the market already fell that much and you drop it again. And that's a terrible situation to be in. That's when speed really becomes an issue. But maybe you hit a point that, this is my bottom line. I'm not selling for less than that. Yeah. Be clear with yourself about that up front. Like, what is your needs? Your house is like, what's market value? How do we determine market value?
Well, it's basically what people are willing to pay for it.
Right.
And what conditions or what similar properties in your area have been typically selling.
You said it right the first time. It's what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
So when we're pricing a house, we're predicting a future event based on past data, right? We don't know market value as real estate agents. We can estimate what it might be, but we don't know market value until it happens. Right. And
especially if your comparables are, like I said, in a different time window, right? Obviously, if your neighborhood is all of a sudden hot and there's 3, 4, 5 sales happening in that month, it shows you a better picture of what that demand is for that area. But
totally. And I can show you graphs and data to the end of time showing you that the longer something is on the market, the less showings we're going to have. Yeah. So my opinion as a real estate professional is that you price it with the best information you have. You put it on at the best price that you think is accurate, and then the number of showings you get in that first 2 weeks tells you everything you need to know about your decision-making process. If we're getting tons and tons of showings and we wait and we do a small price adjustment, or we wait for that offer to come in. If nothing's coming on, like, that is bulletproof information that's telling you something's wrong.
Yeah, so absolutely. I totally agree with that. Effectiveness of open houses. What are the pros and cons of...
This is a cool topic.
Yeah.
Because people love open houses or they think they're useless. And I mean, when I mean people, I mean the public, the sellers. Yeah. And it's true. They are very helpful and they are useless. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is It's unlikely that someone's going to host an open house on your house and that buyer is going to walk in off the street and buy your house.
Yeah,
it happens.
Yeah,
it happens to us maybe once a year. It's a noteworthy event when that happens.
Yeah.
But what does happen is your real estate professional will host an open house on another listing like yours that they have, meet a buyer, show them your house, and sell your house. What I'm saying is this is one of the way that your agent's going to meet buyers. Mm-hmm. And the more buyers that they can meet, the more likely they're going to find the buyer that they're going to steer towards your house. I think they're important. I think it's important that a real estate agent has 20 listings and they do open houses on all 20 of them. Mm-hmm. Because that's a whole nother avenue of finding people, meeting people to potentially buy their listings.
Yeah. And even if your listing agent's not hosting it themselves, but bringing in maybe a partner or a trusted colleague to come in and host it, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to
and
they can actually help if a buyer does come in. They can actually help.
Exactly, and in my case, I never host open houses for agency reasons. I never host open houses on my own listings, but a buyer's agent will host an open house. Now, you might look at that as a member of the public or a seller and go, well, that's a pretty long game for me to be willing to play with my time, my house, because there's no guarantees there. Well, that's true. But here's the other benefit to open houses for the seller, direct benefit. There are people interested in your house. Your house hit the market. It's a new listing. It's gone out. Phone calls are made, sales calls are made, emails are made, and there's people out there interested in your house. If there is an open house happening, that person that's thinking about buying your house is starting to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
Because, oh my goodness, a whole bunch of people are going to come see this house on Saturday. And that's potentially going to spur them to make a decision to look at your house sooner, buy your house sooner. Maybe they show up at the open house. It's super common for a buyer to show up with their own agent during that open house time. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's a good idea. I want to address security because that's people's biggest danger with biggest fear with open houses. Yes, you're going to have people coming into your house. The real estate agent's job is to keep an eye on them. However, if there's 5 people in the house, it becomes incredibly difficult to keep an eye on everybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I have never in my career ever had any experience with something going missing during an open house. I've never had anyone in all the open houses I've hosted over my 20-year career ever had someone show up that I didn't feel like was a legitimate adult looking to buy a house. Mm-hmm. It's not how robbers rob houses. They do. They don't show up and put their face and meet you and shake your hand and then steal stuff. It's just not what they do. They come in the back door when you're sleeping, right? Yeah. So it's unlikely. Having said that, put your stuff away. Put your valuables away. Don't leave things out in the open. I mean, you're going to do that naturally anyways. But just make it as safe as possible. Your agent's going to do everything they can to keep track of things. Yeah.
And we keep a ledger of people who we make it mandatory that they sign in their names and their phone numbers and whatnot for one or two reasons, but it's also for security. So
and ask your agent that, like, are you making everybody sign in? We don't let anyone in unless we have a name. Of course, if they're a bank robber and this is their master plan, they're probably going to put John Doe on the paper, but nonetheless.
Yeah, it keeps people honest. Well, Chris, I'd like to thank you again. We're kind of running out of time, so stay tuned for our next episode, and we'll see you soon. Have a good day.
Bye.